What is going on, everybody? I had just gotten to sleep. Only been asleep for a couple of hours. Wife woke me up, said the Steelers traded George Pickens to the Dallas Cowboys. I mean, last night there was a bunch of rumblings that started kicking up about this move being kind of on the horizon. So I wasn't surprised at all. I figured that this was going to come out at some point today. Just thought it might be a little bit later in the day so I could get a little bit of rest. But just looking at the general consensus and all the people freaking out on Twitter, I did want to jump on here and try to answer some questions, talk about some different things. Just with the move itself, it seems like people are freaking out. I think it's hilarious, to be honest with you. But um, I think really we got 36 people in here climbing. I'll just go ahead and kind of get started with the rant. I mean, this was like a move that really felt inevitable to me. If you followed me over the course of the last year or so, I think you guys kind of saw that happen a little bit. But when the Steelers moved on from Deontay last offseason, that move was made primarily with George's best interest in mind. They wanted to get him away from Deontay to see if he would kind of grow up a little bit, be a little bit more mature. There was a bunch of locker room issues with him and Deontay in the same room. They moved on, got new quarterbacks. They gave George his natural position, which was the X receiver spot. That was Deontay's spot for a long time while he was here. They wanted to try to see if they could tap into more, get him to reach for his potential. Over the course of the season, man, we saw what happened. I think that's doesn't need a ton of rehashing. There were some games where there was, a lack of effort, lack of details. Unfortunately, he did get a little bit banged up towards the end of the season, but he didn't take the jump that I think myself and other people wanted him to take. And then, that kind of led them to go big game hunting in the offseason. They traded for DK Metcalf. DK Metcalf is an ex receiver. Naturally, that's going to force, George to kind of go back to playing the Z. That's an issue of itself. I've talked at length on the channel about just the overlap kind of usage skill set. It was going to be a clunky fit with them two on the field together at the same time. You need somebody that's going to block in the receiver room, but that was always kind of inevitable. I've said on multiple occasions that he was already told earlier in the offseason they were not going to give him an extension. This was going to become a thing regardless of what people want to believe or not. Going into the final season of his rookie deal, George has outplayed his contract. He's due for an extension. He wasn't going to get one here. We talked during the draft stream and stuff like that they tried to deal him. They tried to get another day 2 pick, couldn't get one. I understand the frustration around the pick not being until 2026. I totally get that. I also understand people's frustration in terms of whenever a team trades one of the more popular players and one of the more talented players on the team. I completely understand why people would be upset about that. With that being said, this was an inevitable thing. Okay. The Steelers were not going to be extremely competitive. They weren't going to compete for a Super Bowl this year with or without George Pickens. Them trading him is a blow because they don't necessarily have other proven wide receivers on the depth chart that are going to be able to step in and give you 1,000 yards like George is going to be able to do next year. Having said that, though, my point on why I preferred to trade him, preferably during the draft or before the draft for obvious reasons, was because just to go ahead and get ahead of it. Don't let this linger into training camp where he kind of makes a scene, doesn't show up because he's not going to get a new deal. The quarterback situation was already going to be a huge talking point. You got other guys like TJ Watt that are waiting on an extension. That's probably going to be a talking point during training camp. Just didn't want to deal with the distraction, knowing that wasn't ever going to be he wasn't ever in their long-term plans. I don't know how else to say that other than that's just the reality of how they viewed him as a player. Now, I understand the issue with trading a player like this talented and not getting an immediate return that you can see a replacement, if you will. Having said that, though, they tried to hit everybody up during the draft on Friday night and just nobody was taking the bait. The best thing they got was a round 4 pick. I think Diana Rossini tweeted that out. We talked about that on the Ends No Ball. John and I talked about that at length off air as well. It's just the reality of the situation. He didn't have that much of a market. And if he did, if they were able to get a day 2 pick in last year's draft, they would have did it. but they couldn't. So it wasn't for lack of trying. Like I know that they tried their absolute best, but it just how it worked out. Now, after they weren't able to get a day two pick this past year, I did think that there was a better chance that he was just going to remain on the roster at least until camp and things blew up. Dallas was clearly desperate for a wide receiver. You just look at their draft haul and things like that. They took a guard, Tyler Booker, in the first round. Day two, they came back around, got Donovan Ezaraku and Savone Revel, went defense, and they still had, like, exiting the draft weekend, they had a huge need opposite CD Lamb. So this is a good landing spot for Pickens. I'm not going to focus on that too much. But I think that the general consensus, it doesn't seem like people are a fan of the trade. I completely understand. But, like, for me, it's really not that hard to imagine because I just knew that he wasn't part of their, like, long-term plans anyway. And I actually do think that this is a pretty good value for, like, what they ended up getting back, if you can get over the fact that the pick's not going to happen until next year, which I understand. Like, that's a difficult thing to get over. So I think the other thing that I see, like, people saying, like, it hurts more now that they took a guy like Jack Sawyer in the fourth round, taking an edge rusher, which is clearly, like, their, like, strong point of the team, instead of taking a wide receiver. I totally understand that as well. I mean, I published my grades article for Steelers Now, I think, like, sometime over the weekend, maybe Friday of last week. And one of the things that I talked about was just that was a tough one for me to swallow, really. Just not just simply because taking an edge over a wide receiver, there were just multiple wide receivers on the board that I thought were better players than Jack Sawyer was. Like I mentioned, Elokayo Manor, especially with the Robert Woods signing happening post draft. It seems like they wanted to get some sort of blocking wide receiver in there, somebody that could play in condensed splits, could come down and help you in that regard. And Io Manor, like, that's kind of like the whole intrigue with him. You get the two-way go, you get the burst off the ball, and he's kind of a developing player who's kind of new to the game, still coming over from Canada. But there were other players available that they could have looked at. Jalen Royals was a guy that I liked. He was inside my top 100. Torrey Horton was a guy also that I liked as well. I think I finished with like a late third round grade on him as well. Those guys went like the fourth, fifth round. So there were options. I think it's definitely fair to critique those, especially knowing that, this was inevitable, whether it was going to happen this year or whether, George was going to play out the final year of his contract, similar to Calvin Austin. But that is what it is. There's nothing we can do about it right now. So I do understand all those things. I'll take as many like questions as you guys want to throw at me, and I will try to like make sense of the whole situation. Like I said, I'm sorry. Like if you're upset about the trade, like I said, I do sympathize with it. I know from a fan perspective, it sucks. I mean, as like the leader in the clubhouse before the Steelers drafted Pickens, like someone who campaigned to get him to Pittsburgh, I am a part of me is definitely still kind of bummed out that he wasn't able to kind of like reach his full potential, because how many times I've said just how talented of a player he is. But everything happens for a reason. Like there's not much I can do about like just dwelling on that fact. So like I said, we got a little over 100 people in here early. Was it Wednesday morning at 9:00? Sheesh. If you guys could just do me a favor, like that video for me. Let's help get this thing to as many people as possible. It's just a free, easy way to support the channel, and I really appreciate it. Starting to go through some of these questions. Man, I figured this would happen. Shirley Woods is going to be our starting wide receiver outside Amari Cooper? ? I mean, I would be disappointed if there's a whole solution to this like problem that is now on the roster is Robert Woods, just at his like current age and like the things that he brings to the table. I'd be disappointed, and I'd be kind of surprised if that was their pivot point. But this is a team that played Van Jefferson a million snaps last year, so it's just possible that they just don't value this position as much as they used to. Having said that, though, there are some options out there available. You mentioned Amari Cooper. I think that Cooper was pretty rough last year on tape, just from what I saw. But he would be a guy to throw out. I would also throw out, I think that I tweeted this out too, but the Steelers got some reassurance that Rodgers was still like planning to make his way to Pittsburgh before the draft. That was one of the things that gave them a little bit of solace. I felt like heading into the weekend, maybe Alan Lazard, I think he like might have reworked his deal with the Jets. I know they didn't draft a receiver very high either, so who knows like what his availability is, but I mean, I can't imagine that he has like a robust trade market or you couldn't pry him away from the Jets' hands. Again, not to say that that's like a great solution. I don't think Lazard is a wide receiver too either. There's probably not great solutions out there for this year, but in my opinion, a lot of the moves that the Steelers have made really have been with 2026 in mind. I think the comp pick strategy this offseason, letting a lot of guys walk that they already kind of had replacements for, being very careful and cognizant of like how they're spending in the free agency process to protect those compensatory picks. And just like with this trade too, like trading him away right now for a third round pick next year. They got a ton of ammo to go get a quarterback next year. Of course, none of that matters if you don't actually nail the pick. And I think that it's fair to wonder if they're going to be able to do that. But you know, 2026 is definitely the what I have my eye on right now. Not to say I'm ready to like just punt the season. They're not tanking necessarily. I know I've been really critical of them having like 1 foot in, 1 foot out, but I think that this is a little more of a measured approach than maybe in some years prior. It's just my opinion. I don't expect everybody to agree with that. DB talked about the guys they target in the draft, high character team captains, leaders. Yeah, I mean, I don't think that necessarily was a surprise, but I also don't think that I do think it was probably intentional. So we'll see what that looks like. Again, when you don't take a receiver, a lot of receivers are kind of divas in general. So that probably helps with that perception as well. But even like Roman Wilson, like God, they spent a third round pick last year on. I'm sure that they're probably still pretty high on Roman. I was pretty skeptical of him as a prospect, just where I had him graded. But at the same time, this opens up a ton of like playing time for him next year. And I think that getting a guy like Robert Woods in the building, like somebody that's done it for a long time, he should be in Robert Woods' hip pocket, really from right now up until the season ends. Like he should trying to take as many pointers from that guy as he possibly can. Woods has been a team captain, a really good player for a long time. So I'm interested to see like what his development looks like as well. I'm hoping that he even exceeds my pre-draft expectations. So yeah, my guy Ben, what a mess. Yeah, I see y'all are freaking out at this point. Reset the team. The first year I've invested, we lose. It's your first year you're invested in the Steelers or just invested to this level, I guess would be my question. Lenore Sellers season. Yeah. I mean, it's gonna be fun. Like I've already watched probably like 8 or 9 different 2026 quarterback prospects. I am pretty encouraged by what I've seen. It is tricky because it's a lot of like first year starter types, guys that don't have like a ton of playing experience, guys that weren't necessarily operating in great ecosystems, but there's a lot of traitsy guys for sure. Now development's not linear. We'll see what those trajectories look like over the course of the season. But there's a lot of talent in college football right now at the quarterback position. I am very optimistic that this upcoming class will be better in 2025 and the Steelers are going to be well positioned. I feel like to grab a quarterback, tons of ammunition. I imagine they're going to be very aggressive in getting their guy. So I'm excited about that. I wouldn't say tanking, but I like I said, I do think it's like very fair to question like not taking a receiver in the draft, knowing that this thing was going to come to a head at some point. I totally understand. I agree with you guys. I talked about it beforehand, even before like the Pickens trade was announced. I said the same thing. Like there were guys available on day 3 of the draft that I would have looked to just as like future kind of planning with Calvin Austin and George Pickens being free agents after the season and needing like a long-term kind of depth plan. Opposite that. I just wanted to have something to replace him. Yeah, I mean, I understand that. I mean, there is time where they could potentially maybe work something out. We'll see. I'm not super optimistic that they're going to be able to find like a suitable wide receiver to opposite DK. It's really going to require like one of the young bucks kind of stepping up. Maybe Robert Woods gives you something on early downs to try to give you something as a blocker, but it's definitely tough. It's definitely tough. Totally agree. Totally agree. Da, da, da. Since we aren't winning anything, let's embrace the tank and trade Minka and TJ. I mean, I don't think they're going to do that, to be honest with you. I think that would be a tough sell, but we'll see. I mean, obviously with Watt's contract situation, going into the last year of his deal, they've been very transparent about like wanting to keep him a Steeler, but we'll see what happens with that. I mean, he is, on the wrong side of 30 now. He had a little bit of a slow finish to the season. I still think that they're going to try to get something done with TJ. I do. I think that it would be fair to kind of wonder, and this is kind of my thought process when, we entered the off season, and I said that my personal philosophy would be to blow it up. And that didn't just include like, some of the players, some of the older players. That also include like the coaching staff. Like I was very much a proponent of like hitting the reset button just because of I really did think that this kind of group of players, and I still think that has kind of tapped out with what they're going to be able to accomplish from a timeline perspective. And I think it's fair to wonder if they're going to be able to thread the needle here with getting a quarterback, getting everything like in place that they need to get in place to compete in the AFC while TJ's still a relevant like player. Because he's probably got edge rushers on the other side of 30. They do decline. There's not a lot of guys that are super productive later in their careers, especially like his archetype of player. That is something to take note of. Like some of the guys that are able to kind of sustain their success later into their mid 30s are usually like power rushers, and that's not TJ. So it's fair to wonder if like they're going to be able to thread the needle and get everything in place while he's still like relevant. Is he still going to be a really positive player, especially when you take his contract into account by the time they're ready to compete again? I think it's fair. The Minka thing is a more delicate situation where I think it's got less to do with age and more about like, what the Steelers think of him in terms of, does he still have the same amount of range? What's his turnover production going to be like? I mean, if you're paying him like one of the top safeties, you're going to want more like impact plays, splash plays on the ball. And he hasn't produced that the last 2 years. So I understand that as well. I do think that Minka's still a good player. I'm anticipating he's, bounces back next season. But yeah, I mean, I think it's fair to wonder about like what they're going to do with the rest of the roster. I don't necessarily think, though, I don't get the sense that the Pickens trade is something that is going to make them pivot to a full-on tank job. Just don't think it's in their DNA. I think they're going to try to remain competitive. I just think that the Pickens thing in itself, like in a vacuum, which teams don't operate in a vacuum, I understand that, but he was never in their long-term plans, and that's really why they went the direction that they did. So, let's see here. Mason, I'm upset. I wish you would have taken Io Manor, however it's spelled, round 4. Yeah, I mean, totally agree. I get that. Bizat, what does the wide receiver class look like? I haven't watched like too many guys in particular. Eric Singleton was a guy that I came across. He's transferring to Auburn next year. He's kind of nice. He played at Georgia Tech. I'm a fan of his. Jordan Tyson is a guy that I've kind of got like secondhand views on just because he played. I was watching Sam Levitt. I think it's how you say his last name. Denzel Boston from Washington is another guy that I've like kind of got written down in my notes. The Sirach kid from Indiana, he's going to get a major quarterback upgrade with Fernando Mendoza coming over. So there's some guys out there. I will say, like I was reading, I think it was Dane Brugler's mock draft, because what I do throughout the draft season, you guys have probably heard me talk about this, but non-draft eligible prospects, I have a note in my phone. So like when I'm watching a player, scouting a player, and there's another player on the screen that continuously jumps out over the course of time or whatever, or I just see somebody like watching college football on Saturdays, I just like will jot their names down. Sometimes they end up being like relevant prospects, sometimes they don't, but just guys that I want to watch during summer scouting. And, there are a couple of receivers that I just talked about that had like jumped out to me last year that weren't draft eligible. But reading Dane Brugler's mock draft, he said that the top of the 2026 wide receiver class doesn't necessarily look great. Right now, there's more questions kind of than answers with that in that regard, but we'll see what it looks like. I don't know. I find it. I would be remiss if I acted like I had watched all of those guys in depth because I just haven't yet. I've been focusing on quarterbacks. So back to loaded boxes. Yeah, I mean, they're going to see a lot of loaded boxes in general because they're going to play a ton of multi-tight end sets. I think the draft selection of Caleb Johnson really signaled that they're going to try to get into like the outside zone world, the mid zone world, even more probably than they were able to last year. A lot of under center play action stuff. So I mean, there's gonna be some loaded boxes. I think it's fair to acknowledge that DK is gonna see a lot of help over the top. I mean, but that's the reality of being a wide receiver one at the next level. These guys are gonna have to step up for sure. I think Crenshaw is worthy of paying DK over JP and using he's a diva excuse to trade him. I mean, yeah, I understand that to a degree. I think that that's definitely it's definitely something to keep in mind. I don't necessarily know that they view the DK drama the same way as the GP drama, though. I don't know. That was just my opinion. For me, the Pickens stuff, I was definitely more willing to kind of look the other way and just kind of it is what it is, typical receiver BS, you know what I'm saying? Until like the effort like on the field just got so bad at different points last year, like the jogging on the routes and things like that. When they were clearly trying to get in the ball, knowing how much they needed him to make plays because he was really their only guy out there on the perimeter. So I do understand that. I don't necessarily think that that is a problem on DK's film. Now, the stuff like blowing up on the sideline, like, is he a super competitive dude? Similar antics on the sideline, maybe as Pickens? Yeah, probably. I haven't heard anything saying like anything about like his work ethic or anything like that off the field or how he is in the locker room or anything like that. Now, if that stuff's out there, like feel free to send it to me. I don't from reputable sources, of course, but I don't I don't know anything about that if it was one. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is it is tough because Cam's in the last year of his career. I want a Super Bowl for him in the worst way, just selfishly, because like he definitely deserves it. I mean, he's been an all-time Steelers great. And those guys, the defense is still going to be really talented. You just look up and down the depth chart. I mean, the front seven in particular, I think the cornerback depth is really scary right now. If you just look at it, the depth chart, I was planning on write about that here in the next couple of days. But I mean, front seven, though, it should be pretty dang good. I mean, their edge rotation is still intact. Patrick Queen, Peyton Wilson in year two. I mean, even if you acknowledge that Derek Harmon's going to have some up and downs as a rookie, like just traditional youngster kind of stuff right there. I mean, he's going to give you more than Larry Ogunjobi did last year if he's healthy, right? I mean, Ogunjobi was playing a massive amount of snaps and provided very little production. So I mean, you're going to get a little bit of a bump there. I think the question would be, are they going to be able to, fend off Father Time because it is a little bit of an older group. We already talked about TJ getting up there in age, but Cam's age obviously, and then Darius Slade kind of being a stopgap option opposite Joey Porter Jr. going into a completely different scheme where he's not going to be as protected as much. I feel like, but yeah, I mean, definitely youth is not on their side on that side of the ball, but I do think they're really talented. So let's go, Rock Taylor. Yeah. Um, I'm trying to sympathize with the fan base, really. I mean, I definitely understand the whole ordeal, like people being upset when their favorite players get traded. I just think like as I've gotten a little bit older, now that I'm like in my 30s, like I just don't typically attach myself as much to like individual players anymore, other than the guys that like I have like that I've like actually met like in person or have personal relationships, which isn't a lot of them on the team, by the way, but just in general. Um, but I do hope the best for George. I hope he goes and balls out in Dallas. Like I have no ill will or anything like that towards him. He's super talented, and now he's gonna get to play with a legitimately good quarterback. I mean, he's the only. I mean, as we've always kind of said on this channel, but he's the only person that's stopping him from reaching his own potential. And especially now, his situation, he's going to be in a spot that he's going to be able to make himself a lot of money this year. So I'm interested to see what he does with that opportunity. Patrick, could you see us trading for a wide receiver like Dobbs or someone else? Yeah, I mean the receiver room in Green Bay is certainly crowded. They drafted Matthew Golden with the first round pick. That was the first time they spent a first round pick on a wide receiver in ages. So you know Christian Watson's has some health issues. Like, could he be on the move? I don't think that they would trade Jaden Reed. Excuse me. Sorry, it's early, guys, for me. Another guy I mean, Dobbs is more of an X to me, so I wouldn't necessarily say that that would be my favorite. But I don't know how he is as a blocker. I only remember him from like mainly college and just like him being like kind of the sacrificial X. I think it's what Matt Harmon calls him for Green Bay over the last couple of years. He's a solid player. I know he wanted out at some point. I think last year. The other player in that rotation that I think could be interesting would be Dontavian Wicks. Wicks is a different archetype of player than anybody the Steelers probably have on their roster right now. He's like a route runner-ish type. He can get open, create separation. So I like that. I've always kind of admired Wicks' game from afar. The problem is he just doesn't catch the ball consistently. It was a problem in college. It's been a problem in the pros. It's hard, like hands and drops are something that can be improved on in time. So I don't necessarily think it's like necessarily a death knell when I'm talking about a prospects scouting report or evaluation. But once you get into the league and you're a couple years in and you're still having problems with the same stuff, I get a little bit more concerned that it's not going to be something that's going to improve over time. So, but yeah, Dobbs, Wicks, guys like that, I think that it would make sense to at least call on those guys for sure. Um, Thinking with their hearts rather than their head. Yeah, I mean, I think it just depends on like what your outlook was for the 2025 season. Maybe it's just me, but I never really thought that this, even with Rodgers coming on the way, I didn't really think that this team was like a team that was really positioned to make a push in the playoffs with or without George. So, it's just my opinion. But any wide receiver unrestricted free agents you'd be interested in? You know what? I don't know. Let's look. Let's pull up over the cap. Let's see who's still available. I would imagine that the cupboard is pretty dry. Keenan Allen, not really. Mostly a slot receiver. At this point, we already talked about Amari Cooper. Oh man, we're hurt. We are down bad here. I think third on the list is okay. So Tyler Boyd. Is Tyler Boyd signed a 1-year deal in Tennessee? I thought it was more than that, but I guess it wasn't. Or maybe they let him go. I don't know. DJ Turner for the Raiders. Nelson Aguilar. He's a little bit older. Chris Conley, Brandon Powell. Also a little bit older. James Crowder, he's 32. DJ Chark didn't really play last year. Yeah, I mean, there's not really a ton on the free agency market. Gonna be honest with y'all. That list does not inspire me. So if you're trying to fill something else out, that would be probably something that's going to need to happen via trade. At this point, just trade for Ayuk. It seems like he's going to stay put in San Francisco. So, can Will Howard play wide receiver, big tall wide receiver body? Drop a like if you are mad. Yeah, drop a like if you're mad. If you're happy, any support I can give for the channel, I definitely appreciate it for sure. In your early review, rough draft of the quarterbacks you watched, I don't want to spoil it just because I am doing something for Steelers Now on this, and I've spent a lot of time watching the film, so I don't want to give it away right here. But there is 2 quarterbacks that I am more bullish on than others, but I will have that by the end of the week. And then when I do that, I'm sure I'll either share it on here at some point or we'll talk about it in a live stream forum and I can answer some like Q&As and questions on that. But I promise like my thoughts on the quarterback class will be out by the end of the week for sure, by Sunday. I just have like one more guy that I want to watch before I kind of put that out. Seems like GP's issues. I don't know. I don't know if they were actually all stemming from terrible scheme or quarterback play. I definitely think that George produced despite a bad environment around him. I don't think that that's even something you could possibly debate. I mean, the quarterbacks that have been throwing the ball to him over the last couple of years, I mean, it's not been pretty. I think we've talked a lot about, some of the shortcomings. Obviously, Canada, that whole hiring was a colossal disaster. I don't think Arthur Smith is to that level, but I also don't think that Arthur Smith's offense is necessarily great for wide receivers in general or just like the drop back passing game. So I don't know. I don't know what to think of his change of scenery. Like I said, I've said this many times. I would love to get to know. Like, I would just love to be around George just to see like kind of what makes him tick. You know, so I don't know. I don't know what it's going to look like. I will say this as far as Tomlin, he does get credit for managing these vibrant, difficult personalities. I also think that that's a tough conversation that probably requires more context than we typically give it because he is the vocal voice in the room when these players are getting brought on board. So it's almost like he's kind of creating the problem or has a hand in creating the problem that he ultimately ends up having to manage. So I find it difficult to kind of parse out the conversation there. But at the same time, typically, and I'm not saying this is going to happen with George. I don't know what's going to happen. I think all options are on the table, really. He could go to Dallas. He's got a great quarterback. He's got a guy like CD Lamb that's going to take a ton of attention away from him. I think he can obviously cook one-on-one matchups. Um, so a huge year in production or a crazy career is still on the table for George, no doubt. I would just say that historically, when Mike Tomlin's ready to move on from a difficult wide receiver, or the Steelers are ready to move on from a difficult like wide receiver, those wide receivers don't go on to have like a ton of success elsewhere. We've seen it with a ton of different guys. So that would be the only thing that I would say. I just think that the idea that they are, you know, done, you know, says speaks volumes. This is a clear tank, man. That's why I don't get the tank. I really don't think that I would not call it a tank. But the thing with DK, you know, in general, is that DK is still young enough. It's not like he's somebody that's like over 30 that you make that type of trade that you can only paint it as a win now type of thing. I mean, he's 28. So that's a little bit more of a, you know, an understandable thing for sure. Calvin Austin's too small, so is Roman. Yeah, I mean, there's a little bit of like repetitive skill sets there for sure. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I understand like this is totally understandable and it's fair to be like upset. I'm just telling you, they did every single thing they possibly could do to try to get a day two pick during the draft. They just couldn't get it. So to me, and I don't expect everybody to agree, to me, I would have rather them be patient, negotiated a tough deal, get a third round pick and a pick swap next year than take a fourth round pick in the 130s or something like that this year. I just think that from a value perspective, given where the team's at, they're not ready to compete. That value is enough for me to like head into the season with some uncertainty at wide receiver. Is it going to be frustrating? Yep. Could it be ugly opposite DK if some of these other guys don't step up and into bigger roles? Totally get it. But I'm just trying to take a long term, like futuristic approach, um, just because I think that that's the way that I'm choosing to look at the team. I don't think this has any bearing on like whether Rodgers signs with the Steelers or not, but we'll see. Based on the way that I understand it and like some of the conversations I had last night, no, this doesn't affect that. So, but we'll see. Yeah, DK got his bag. I'm sure he's pretty happy with all the the money that he's got. Da-da-da. Maybe a soft tank. Maybe a soft tank. I just don't think of it like that as like cut and dry necessarily, maybe. Because if it was like a true tank, I don't think you sign Darius Slay. I don't think you make the DK move as early as they did. Or maybe they just think he's like such a special player that they couldn't pass up the move. But I think if it was like a for real tank, you would have done what we kind of talked about early in the offseason, like really moving on from some of the older guys, TJ, Minka, those guys have trade value more than George does. So I'm not upset. Starting to worry about their issue in the decision making process. Sometimes better to pay a little more early than your options drop. Yeah, I mean, I think if there's one thing we know now about Omar Khan, it's that he is a very patient negotiator, and that has been good in some instances. I think the Chase Claypool thing was good. The way that they worked out that deal. I think that the Brandon Ayuk wide receiver saga last offseason was a complete catastrophe. This is not that, in my opinion. I just think that the value that they got was as good as it was going to get, to be honest with you. So we'll see though. Um, it's one of those moves makes our draft works and also gives us the worst quarterback room, wide receiver room in the league. Is it the worst wide receiver room in the league? I'd have to think about that. I don't think. I don't think that that's accurate. Definitely takes a hit though. There's more questions now for sure. DK getting 14. I don't know. Be interesting. I mean, he seemed like pretty excited about 4, but that was when 14 was occupied. So I wonder if they I mean, I'm sure they'll let him change it. Or I don't know like what the rules are about that. Carnell Tate is good from Ohio State. Yeah. Yeah. I noticed him quite a bit when I was studying Will Howard. So what's the point of getting Rodgers? I mean, I mean, I understand where you're coming from with that for sure. Um, But having said that, I do think that there is value in getting a veteran who's been around and can give you, I hate to use the word stability with Rodgers because that just does not seem like the right word to be synonymous with what he did with the Jets. But I do think that there is value in signing him for cheap and getting the, let's just say what it is, like 18th to 20th best quarterback play. It's probably like the I mean, is that like realistic? I think there's value in that just because it gives you some sort of like baseline to where you can evaluate the rest of the offense. You know, I know I think I've said this, but I would be interested in seeing like a guy like Will Howard play next year, even if it's like a short audition, like 4 to 6 games. But at the same time, I don't think I mean, like playing him week one, it's just not like I just don't think that's realistic. I don't want to set him up for failure. And I also like want to be able to evaluate the other guys. Like I already mentioned Roman Wilson a couple times. Like I'm not completely ready to just throw that draft pick and that capital just in the trash. I understand he was hurt last year, and this is coming from somebody who was lower on him as a prospect than a lot of other people were. But I want to see him, get the opportunity to kind of see what he can do. And providing him with a better quarterback play, I think that just makes more sense. Same thing with Mason. I understand that too, but like for me, like Mason's been a backup his entire career. That's like kind of like what he is. I think he can come in and give you something off the bench or in short spurts, but like I don't want him playing 17 games. I think that that's probably pretty easy. What 26 quarterback were you disappointed by watching? Um, I will say I was pretty disappointed by Levitt, to be honest, just because I got some recommendations like early in the process from up on him, and I just felt like what I was watching wasn't very translatable to the league. So I think it's not to say he doesn't have talent. It's just like there's a lot on there that just like I just didn't think was Sunday football. A lot of like him just running around scrambling, and I just don't think he's going to be able to play like that in the league. Very, very few like Sunday throws or like Sunday reps that I was seeing on film. But I watched 3, 4 games. So, do you think Rogers had any say on the Pickens trade? No, no, don't. If I was Khan, what would I do in this situation? Well, I definitely would have taken that deal. I think getting a third, and then a pick swap is more than enough for me, knowing that he wasn't in their long term plans. Now, how they navigate the rest of the 6 months, I definitely acknowledge that that's going to be pretty difficult for sure. So I would probably start by calling. I'd probably start by calling the usual suspects, some of the same teams we talked about last year. We already talked about Green Bay. Probably start to call about that. I don't want to resort to the Lazard thing just because it feels so boring. But as a fallback option, I don't think that he's just like a completely useless player either. See, Houston drafted 2 wide receivers, which Green Bay also drafted Savion Williams. So I would imagine that somebody in that room is getting dealt. I do not know who's going to play there right now. I don't know. It's tough. I mean, they do have what? So they have mini camp or OTAs like coming up soon. So we'll get some type of clarity on that. I mean, Calvin Austin's probably the leader in the clubhouse right now, right? I mean, he was the guy that played the most last year out of all the guys they got on the roster. So is George going to get a contract immediately? I don't know. I mean, I would say probably not, but I mean, Dallas typically like waits till the last minute to do all their deals. So would kind of be and like not what we normally see with the Cowboys. How does going all in with Rodgers? I don't think the Rodgers thing was ever like all in, just because like I just don't think that Rodgers is that type of player anymore. Like I don't think Rodgers is going to be able to come in here and push them over the top. So, DB, wouldn't we get a third round pick? Yeah, I mean, yes, that is true, but you have to understand though, like that's one the third round pick, the comp pick would be another year removed. So, like, I understand people saying that they're frustrated that they didn't get a third round pick this year in 2025. They tried to get it, they held out, they negotiated hard, they got it in 2026 instead. The 2027 comp pick would be like in the 100s though. So it's a lower pick obviously than the one they're going to get next year from Dallas, and you have to wait an additional year to get it for it to actually come to fruition. And there's a lot of like stipulations that come with that too, right? Is like what type of scene was he going to cause like in training camp, knowing that he wasn't going to get a new deal, wasn't going to be the number one option in the offense. What was his production going to be like this year going into a contract year? You would like to say that he's going to be super, super motivated to go out and ball out, but there's no guarantee. I mean, and then there's also the portion of it of he could get hurt. Like, he could get hurt, he get banged up, affect his market value and free agency. Um, he did get banged up a little bit last year. I don't think that he has any injury concerns with that regard, but that is like something you have to take into account with like the whole like playing the comp pick game in that regard is like there's no guarantee. And like I also think that when you talk about like the third round comp pick, right? You're usually getting up there into like the $20 million a year, like kind of what Dan Moore signed. And it's easy to see a world where like Pickens at his very best is definitely is definitely a $20 million a year receiver. But if there were so many teams that turned the Steelers down during draft weekend for like a third round pick, how many teams are going to be like willing to just like pony up and be like, would have been willing in this scenario? Like, say they let him play out the season and everything worked out. How many teams were going to be willing to pony up $20 million to where you can even get that third round comp pick? So I don't know. I don't necessarily think that was like a set it and forget it type of thing either. So Lazard's a wide receiver 4. I mean, yeah, I'm not definitely not calling him a wide receiver 2. I'm just saying I'm trying to think about options maybe. Um yeah, I mean when I tweeted that out after the DK trade, I just felt like the writing was kind of on the wall, knowing that they had already like kind of told him that, you know, he wasn't getting an extension. I felt like this was kind of an inevitable thing. But I just thought that it would be done during the draft weekend. I didn't think they would get a second, but I thought that they might be able to get like an early third. Late second, early third was kind of the range I was shooting for. But yeah, I mean, based on what I was told, like the market just was not there for him. So you're good. No reason to apologize, man. I'm excited, to just hop on here and talk a little bit about just try to make sense of the whole thing, try to bring like a level-headedness to the conversation. I know a lot of people are going crazy on Twitter. I would much rather like do these types of discussions on here than on there, just because like I feel like people are just being crazy irrational right now. Tyreek, no, 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 no. I want no part of that business. How do you get to the point of making a push in the playoffs? Simply matter of getting the franchise quarterback. I mean, yeah, I mean it's the NFL is a quarterback league, so that just is what it is. The most important things that you got to have as an organization. Like I think there's like four kind of pillars, right? Got to make sure that you have the shot callers in place, right? Like the general manager, whoever's handling your personnel, ideally, and then the head coach, like those guys being in unison and lockstep every step of the way. So those two guys, and then your play caller is the next biggest decision, and then the quarterback. So like those four guys are always the most important thing when you're trying to figure out who the serious teams in the NFL are. And the Super Bowl teams, they have all four. So that's kind of the rationale. I do think that Tomlin with the right quarterback and if he nailed the OC hire could be the guy to get them back to the promised land. I'm skeptical on the offensive coordinator part of that a little bit. And you got to get lucky a little bit with the quarterback as well. There's no perfect science, as they say, in terms of finding a guy, but you got to continue to take swings. They're going to be well positioned to move up and take a guy next year. There's no guarantee that guy's going to work. They may miss on a couple more quarterbacks. It took them a while to find the next guy after Bradshaw before they ended up getting Ben. But Lenore Sellers, lots of tools, man, lots of tools. It's chalked. I hope people aren't expecting a DJ Moore trade if people didn't like Pickett's effort. Yeah, I'm out on that for sure. Yeah. I will say this though, as critical as I've been about DJ Moore, like the effort and stuff last year in Chicago, I don't know if that was actually a thing because I don't remember. I thought that Moore was kind of frustrating for football reasons when I was like studying Fields because I literally watched every single game that Fields played after he got traded to the Steelers for obvious reasons. But I didn't remember like him being like a real bad effort player. But last year was atrocious. I don't know exactly what happened with that. If it was a new contract, maybe he just wasn't taking things seriously anymore. I don't know what the deal was there. But yeah, based on what I saw last year, I would not be the team that would be willing to, try to go pry DJ Moore out of Chicago. So sure. All right. We got about a little over 200 people in here. If you guys could, just please drop me a like. All that stuff, just a free, easy way to support the channel. Try to get this thing out to as many people as possible. I sincerely appreciate it. The Pickett selection, yeah, I mean, that's the thing too, is when I was like trying to grade the Steelers draft haul, I ended up kind of bumping it up a little bit after watching some of the 2026 guys in general, just because I was really nervous that they were going to reach on a quarterback just because they needed one and they didn't. So I think the process in that regard was good on draft weekend. Again, the only thing that matters is that you actually get the quarterback next year. And there's no guarantee that they're going to be able to do that, but they are well positioned to. So, but they didn't need another Kenny Pickett debacle for sure. Don't you think Rodgers will want to come? I mean, I definitely get what you're saying, Jake. And Rodgers, if there's anybody who's particular about his surroundings and, he typically has this kind of posse that he brings with him place to place. He did it with New York. I don't necessarily think that the Steelers are going to be so excited to kind of cater to those demands. But my rebuttal to your question would be like, what other options does Rodgers has? If he wants to play, the only place for him to play is in Pittsburgh. Like they need him. He needs them just as much. So, What about John Mechie? I mean, I feel like we've been talking about John Mechie on this channel for like 3 years. I'm not opposed to like making the call for Houston. They were another team that drafted 2 wide receivers. They took both the Iowa State guys and Nico Collins. I know Tank Dell Probably isn't playing this year though, so that's something. They already lost Robert Woods. I don't know how they would feel about trading more of their depth, but could they maybe not have gotten the same value or maybe more depending on how well he played at the deadline? That way you at least get some more gains from it as well. I mean, that scenario is possible. There's also the unknown, right? Like he could be banged up before the trade deadline. And also, like whoever's trading for him, like Dallas, I'm not saying this is how Dallas views it or not. I don't know. I don't really care to try to figure it out either. Dallas could be looking at it like, okay, we've got the quarterback in place. We know we've got CeeDee Lamb. The offensive line is like stable. We think the defense is good enough. Let's go make an aggressive play and be the team that goes and gets this guy. See if we can tap in to try to compete in the NFC or try to go, make a playoff push. How many teams are going to be willing to make that type of deal at the trade deadline? There's only a select few teams that are, still going to be in the playoff hunt that are going to need a wide receiver, that are going to be willing to fork up a third round pick for what could ultimately end up being 8 games of a player instead of 17. So what you're saying is that the Steelers in this scenario get more games, but the receiving team gets less. So they may not be willing to give up as much. So you may not get a third round pick for 8 games of George Pickens and then having to give him a new contract. You see what I'm saying? So like there's give and take with all these scenarios. And I definitely understand like looking at it with a critical eye. And I'm glad that you guys are being a lot more rational about it on here in the chat than people are on Twitter, just like trying to look at things. And I feel like being a little bit more intentionally dense, if you will. But, there is some give and take there for sure. No, you don't want that. You don't want Gabe Davis, which I probably shouldn't say on the live stream because they'll end up signing him and then I'll have to try to talk myself into it or talk to you guys into it. Are the Cowboys going to have enough to resign? I have no idea what their books look like. I would assume they have some sort of plan. Who knows with Dallas, man? They do things extremely strange. I think Gabe Davis is like a wide receiver 4, maybe like a low end wide receiver 3. So I guess cost, Gabe does block, I think. So maybe I could see it. It would be a cost thing for me. If it's really cheap, I thought that the contract the Jags signed him to was just absolutely outrageous in general. In real time, I said it was just a terrible thing, and he was awful last year for them. So we'll see. Wide receiver last year, quarterback this year, passing on wide receiver in the trade, waiting on some of the extensions. I mean, I definitely agree. I mean, I don't think that anybody was more critical of their approach to the wide receiver room last year than I was. So I agree in that perspective. That's also like one of the things that I'm talking about with, taking this deal right now and making sure you secure a third round pick and then the day 3 pick swap rather than trying to wait this thing out to training camp or trying to wait this thing out to the trade deadline with the unknowns of the situation. Because you weren't, I mean, let's just be honest, like you weren't going to get more, like significantly more than what they got, even if they waited. So I think for me, from a process standpoint, this is better process than what they did last year. Now we'll see if the results are good or not, but we'll see. The ASU offense was scat heavy. Yeah. Oh man. I will be honest with you. When I was watching Levitt, though, I did have a thought in the back of my head that I might have been too low on Scatterboo. Just because like he was doing some stuff games that I hadn't watched when I evaluated his stuff coming out. He was doing some stuff that was just crazy. His style of play is so unique too. That is one of the things with Levitt. And I tried to, even though I said I was underwhelmed by his film, when I do like summer scouting, it's kind of a different vibe, and I handle that part of the process different than like, and I don't get to as many players in summer scouting as other people do, just because I don't do the draft stuff full time. I wish I would, but I don't. But I try to be like more optimistic in summer scouting and like see the best in players while obviously acknowledging, their where they need to develop just because they got more time. Like I talked about it at the onset of this video is like there's a lot of guys in this class that have only started 1 year. So they just don't have a lot of experience on their side. So there is like they're very early on their, developmental runway. And Levitt could still be good. I was underwhelmed by what I saw just based on what I had heard from other people. So how many years do you think Cam will play? This year, maybe next. We'll see what kind of position Steelers are in next year. If he's able to stay healthy this year, I think him retiring a Steeler is definitely, you know, fitting. So, yeah, 2026 there. I mean, that's what I'm saying. I don't. It could. I just think that this was the best approach. I understand if people disagree, but yeah, this is also a good point by Josh. So it's also based on you not signing any free agents. So that's one of the things too is with if you're wanting to play the comp pick game with Pickens, you'd have to approach free agency differently next offseason, like and the guys that you target. And they approached it differently this year to kind of make sure that they kept all their comp picks in their back pocket and try to play that game. So it does limit you in some regards as well. So just join, don't hate it. Maybe it's a time to heal, reset, get out of the cycle. Let's try for a losing season. We'll see. We'll see what happens. Let's see. Kelly, a lot of you guys on the Lenore Sellers bandwagon. I see it. I see that you guys are already locked into the draft stuff. I'm appreciative of that. Chris, I really appreciate the super chat, man. Thank you very much. We traded AB for a third as well. Headache cured. That's what I'm saying, man. I said this a little bit earlier, but when the Steelers are ready to move on from a wide receiver for football or not football reasons, typically those guys don't go on to do very well after the stop. Now, Pickens is landing in a great spot and he's super talented. A lot of those other guys were talented too. We'll see what it looks like. But history has viewed their trades very favorably with wide receivers. So, all right. So we've been going on for a little bit over an hour. So I am probably going to call it. I've got to get back to getting some sleep. So I'm exhausted. I've been up all night. But I appreciate you guys tapping in with me. 175 people. We get up to like 220, 230 or something like that at 9 in the morning. That's awesome. I really appreciate you guys. Just on your way out, please make sure that you like the video, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, all that good stuff. I'll try to rip through. I'll be balls out for you guys, man. Really do. Force me to play with Mitch and Kenny while Mason stuck to the bench would be bad attitude. Yeah, I get that. I drop a like when the Steelers get GP back. Dang, that's crazy. Let's see. Do you think McMillan from Tampa Bay could be proud away? Yeah, Tampa Bay is another unique one. They are very, very deep. They drafted Tez Johnson late too. Obviously, Ibuka early. I think the thing there is some stuff coming out that maybe Godwin might be a little bit further back than they originally maybe anticipated. So, what was your evaluation of Wilson coming out of college? Yeah, I mean, I think I want to say Roman was like a late third, early fourth round grade. He was inside my top 100, but I was definitely lower on him than consensus. I think the consensus around him was like, I don't have the board in front of me, but I'm pretty sure he was like 50s on the consensus board. I think my thing that I differed on, like I think a lot of other people saw him as a more refined route runner, and I just didn't see that on his film, mainly because like his route tree was super, super basic. I mean, he pretty much all he did was like clear outs, a ton of overs, a ton of crossers. It was a lot of the stuff that Roman Wilson was doing last year in the Arthur Smith offense. So I kind of understood why they took him, and I thought taking him in the third round was perfectly fine. I just kind of saw like more of a wide receiver 3 type, and going into the process without Deontay Johnson, I thought they needed to try to get somebody that had more like wide receiver 2 upside. Now, that evaluation, I don't know how that's going to hold up or not. We just haven't seen Roman play. So until he gets on the field, like we can properly evaluate him with some sort of sample size. I don't know if I'll end up being right on that one or not. I hope he proves me wrong. I hope he's an absolute baller and he's got more to his game than, maybe Michigan allowed to showcase. Next draft in Pittsburgh, yeah, I mean they got a dozen they got like a dozen picks. They're going to be taking a quarterback. It's going to be so lit, man. So lit. I cannot wait. That's why I wanted Deontay Thornton. Yeah, Thornton went early on day 3, man. Tell Jalen and Caleb. Drew Aller, you're a Pittsburgh Steeler. We'll see. I got a lot of Drew Aller thoughts as well. Keith, I'm not. Are you talking about Roman? For me, in order for him to hit his potential, some of the things I remember, and I'd have to go back and like look at my notes, and maybe we'll do like some type of video, or maybe I'll write about Roman coming soon, just with a lot of the questions and stuff that I've already been getting asked about with that. Roman needed to improve against press. I think that he is a tough player, like in the middle of the field. Finds a soft spot in zones, was pretty good in the scramble drill. McCarthy was a guy that liked to get out the pocket. I really appreciated like him on like those deep overs. Like you can see like how his speed definitely created that separation on the horizontal plane, on the vertical plane, getting deep, getting vertical. There just wasn't a lot of reps against press coverage. When he did face press coverage, I just felt like it was pretty much like him trying to win with a speed release. Kind of got bodied a little bit, wasn't able to get guys off his frame. And then, just the route tree stuff. It was just extremely basic at Michigan. It was a lot of free releases, which I'm sure they're going to try to do here in Pittsburgh too. Like, that's not necessarily a bad thing. You don't need him to go out there and be an X playing on the ball all the time. But there is going to come times like on third downs and stuff where you're going to need him to get off press coverage. And I just think it's unproven. You know what I'm saying? So that would be my thing, is like developing more of a release package, getting better with his hands, keeping guys off his frame. And then just as a route runner, I thought there were some wasted steps at the top of the break, not getting in and out as quickly as like his maybe size or build would indicate that he'd be able to. So, yeah. Appreciate you, George. Thank you guys so much. Watson from Green Bay. Yeah, we talked about that for sure. I appreciate it, man. Thank you. Let's see. Anything else? Would you consider it a success if they win 5 games at the draft? I mean, brother, I think I would give up pretty much anything except like, my kids for a quarterback, man. Anything on the team for a quarterback for sure. So yeah, it would definitely be it would be a success if they were able to like bounce back from that. Ultimately, like their ceiling moving forward and like their long-term future is really tied into whoever the next quarterback is going to be. I don't know who that's going to be. I'm working very diligently right now to try and find out, so, but I appreciate your all's continued support. I will holler at you guys very soon. If you guys do have like other questions and want to drop them in the comment section on the way out, like after I close the video, I'll try to go back and answer as many as I can, like maybe later tonight. I would say hit me up on Twitter, but it's just such a disaster over there right now. So I may not even be able to see your stuff. So I appreciate your all's continued support and level-headedness with this conversation, and I will holler at you all next time. Peace and love.